The athletes versus the journalists. Whose stories do you believe? Whose information do you believe? If you look at the traditional journalists, we relied on them for so many years to give us that information about locker room stories and locker room beefs and contracts. But now, as you see in the last few years, former athletes, even current athletes, are invading that traditional journalism space. You have multiple podcasts that's out right now. You got the guys at Pivot. You got Cam Newton's podcast. You got Shannon Sharp with Club Shay Shay. Carmelo Anthony has a podcast. Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce has a podcast. Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson has a podcast. So many others, too many to name in this short clip. They're telling stories right now that traditional journalists can't even speak on, because I'd rather trust the athlete who's actually been there, been in the locker room with those intimate stories about a player not liking a certain player, a bias against a certain player, contract issues. Yeah, they're journalists, they're trained, they're school trained to go to journalism school, but the athlete actually knows. Now, with that being said, the athlete can have a bias as well. He may have a teammate he couldn't stand, a teammate he may have liked that kind of shows favor towards that person. So we got to trust everybody with a grain of salt, right? But I will tell you, I enjoy hearing the stories from the former athletes. It's the way they can kind of paint that picture, almost like you're actually in the locker room or at practice or at batting practice or even on the field. They can tell those stories better than a traditional journalist can tell. A journalist is great when you're breaking contracts and you're breaking free agency news and draft news. I get all that. You guys are spot on with it. But I love to hear the stories from the former athletes, because they can really tell you, hey, this is what really happened. I was there. I was in the mix. I was outside with this guy. Shout out to the athletes, the former athletes, current athletes, that's given us a new way of listening to stories, digesting information, and making our own choice of who we want to listen to. So I ask you the question again, who do you trust more, the athlete or the journalist?